Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Annie Pettit and I am the Chief Research Officer at Peanut Labs, a company that specializes in self-serve sample, and I'm also the VP Research Standards at ResearchNow. Thank you for joining me today. I'm glad you found about a half an hour to spend with me and learn a little bit about new product development with the use of social media data. As we go along, please do feel free to type any questions you might have in the chat box at the side. I'm going to answer as many of those questions as I can once I get to the end of the presentation. All right. So in doing a lot of social media research over the years, I figured out the two main goals that people have for social media data. The first is pretty much show me anything. For all the chatter and discussion and debate we've had over the last few years, a lot of people are still quite unfamiliar with this methodology. For them, they just want to see anything. They want to know what the data looks like and what they might be able to get out of it. But the second most popular topic is, of course, new product development. So can we as researchers and brand managers learn anything about what people want in order to improve existing products and create brand new ones? Now the NPD process is normally outlined as a 6-stage process, beginning with idea generation and then going through to screening, feature specs, development testing, and ending with product launch. Today I'm just going to focus on the idea generation part, the fun part. Now, it would be really nice if this process was straightforward, if you could just sit down and list out 10 new ideas. But that's really not how it happens. Idea generation is, to me, it's a big pile of spaghetti. It involves going back and forth, thinking and rethinking, reading and rereading, and you'll see exactly that as I go through the process when using social media data. Now, over the last 50 years or so, within the ideation stage, marketing researchers have come to rely on a few trusted methods, namely surveys and focus groups. So these tools help us standardize the ideation process, and they include asking people what they like and dislike about existing products, or simply asking them what they'd like to see developed as new products. This standardization helps ensure we collect opinions in a fair and unbiased way. Now, compared to surveys that can ask hundreds of people across a wide geographical region, a limited number of predetermined questions, focus groups reach far fewer people and allow researchers to go beyond stated opinions. They let us personally witness people using, fumbling, and stressing over products that might not even meet their needs. So neither surveys nor focus groups are always the best and perfect method. Sometimes they can constrain the opinions of participants who could be influenced by the moderator or another research participant. Now, one of the biggest problems with traditional research is that it can only be acted on if it's recalled within the time constraints of the research. So with surveys and focus groups, when research participants can't recall an idea they had yesterday or 3 weeks ago, the idea is lost. Now, this problem is somewhat remedied with communities and co-creation methods that might last for more than an hour or more than a day. These give the participant a bit more time to recall that elusive memory. But with social media listening, the time frame can be unlimited, and it can focus on ideas generated yesterday, last month, or even last year. And since most people are the sharing kind of people, they will share their idea when they have it, whether it's in the middle of the night, the weekend, or while they're at work. So that idea isn't lost. Now, another big problem with traditional research is that great ideas aren't always produced on demand. You know, asking people in a survey about problems they've experienced or having people use a product for 2 hours in a focus group, it can result in great ideas. I won't question that. But there's so many more ideas that just won't come up during that time frame. Like me, many people need to percolate their thoughts to generate ideas. And afterthoughts, whether 30 minutes after the survey submit button has been clicked or 2 days after the focus group has been completed, those are little help to researchers. And here's another problem I have. Most research requires a certain relationship to be built between the researcher and the researchee. Now, whether it's in the form of a panel, a client list, or a community, that relationship often demands that a research participant actively build a relationship, whether one way or two way, with the researcher. And this type of relationship isn't required in social listening. It's an excellent way to gather opinions from people who aren't interested in having a relationship with their butter. So the good thing about social media research is that we can listen. We can listen for people who are frustrated with products, who are dreaming about products, who are wishing about products, and we can listen to people at their convenience, whether they shared a thought last night, last week, or last year. So let's start by figuring out how to build that new product data set. Now first, and this is the easy part, you just need to find one piece of data. In this case, I started with a simple phrase, they should make. And I entered that phrase into the system, and I got back thousands of opinions. And many of those, just those, were really cool and pretty interesting. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. As you see here, among all those opinions that use the phrase, they should make, I saw another phrase getting used a lot, the hashtag first world problems. And what better way is there to describe wishing and hoping for something to be developed or fixed? So now I had two phrases to work with, which means I entered two phrases into the system and waited for the data again. So as expected, I got thousands of verbatims that use the phrase they should make, and I also got thousands of verbatims that use the hashtag first world problems. So now you see where this is going. And amongst all my initial verbatims, I found another phrase that is commonly used to point out small problems that need fixing. And now we've got the hashtag just saying. And of course, this gives us three phrases to look for. So now you've figured out exactly what's going on. As we collect data on the phrases we know, we keep finding new phrases that give us even more information. So you can see we've collected a lot of different types of phrases that will help us discover new product ideas. Every one of these indicates a cry for help. And every cry for help is an improved product or a new product. The task at this point is to break each new product development phrase into its key components and reconstruct those components into all possible alternatives. And this will really increase the comprehensiveness of the data. So here you see a number of new product phrases that have been broken apart and the alternate phrases that relate to each component. So in the case of someone should develop, the word someone has been transformed into they and Starbucks and Nike. So the reason we do this is computers are not yet as smart as humans when it comes to this aspect. They need to be programmed to look for plurals and singulars, past and present, different nouns, and more. So until we tell the computer how to be creative in the search, they will search for exactly what we tell it to, even if you wanted much more than that. So after all of this work, and it can take many hours to do well, you'll end up with hundreds of criteria. And those hundreds of criteria will give you millions of verbatim, which sounds like a good thing, and it is, to a point. Depending on the topic, social media data sets can be between 5% and 95% spam, which means we can't stop at simply collecting the data. We need to also identify and eliminate spam and irrelevant messages. So this is where we look for things like unnecessary repetition. A sentence like, I wish Starbucks had peppermint coffee, Starbucks, Starbucks, Starbucks. Or keyword loading. I wish Starbucks made Beaver, Lohan, Gaga, Perry. Or random message generation. I wish Starbucks would make There Are Many I Enjoy Sister. They're nonsense sentences that really don't make sense. They're obviously spam, and those are the kinds of things we need to get rid of. Another problem with a social media data set is memes. And memes are generally fun, if they're not making fun of people. But 10,000 messages saying, I wish they would make another Twilight, or why can't The Simpsons be on all the time, wishful thinking, isn't going to help us out. There are certain kinds of verbatims that are useful and others that are not. So we need to make sure that we don't let the unhelpful ones clog up our pipes and lead us astray. So first, let's consider where all the data comes from. In this case, I'm working with 3 years of data from across the internet. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, anywhere that people can write a conversation. So the first year of data we looked at looked like this. When people were talking about new product development, more than 3/4 of those conversations took place on Twitter. Very far behind in second place was Facebook. Very clearly, people like to use Twitter for quick wishes and dreams about new and better products. In 2013, a year later, we saw quite a big shift. Conversations about new products were still vastly focused in Twitter, but it dropped from 80% of the data set to 70% of the data set. Facebook stayed relatively stable at around 9%. The surprising part was that other websites really came forward. Instead of being just 6% of the data, it was now 16% of the data. So in 1 year, we saw a really big jump in conversations from a larger variety of the smaller websites, not just the big few websites that we're all used to seeing. Then in 2014, the jump increased even more. Twitter dropped from 81% down to 70% and now down to 64%. And other websites increased from 6 to 16 all the way to 25%. So Twitter and Facebook are still the biggest sources for new product development conversations, but people are really turning to other less popular websites for that kind of chatter. Now you might even wonder, does it matter where the data comes from? So from my point of view, there's no debate. Yes, it matters. You can see from this chart that the sentiment expressed on different websites is completely different. Opinions shared on Hotels.com were almost 60% positive and barely 5% negative. But opinions on NeoGAF were about 30% negative and only 10% positive. So if we only collect opinions from one website or a couple of websites, we'd really get a distorted view about what products and services needed improvements and where the product gaps really are. So now let's consider who is sharing all the opinions. If it's just 12-year-old girls, then that really limits the usefulness of the information. So in this data set, approximately 1/3 of the verbatims were associated with a gender. And of those, 57% were male and 43% were female. So though it is skewed towards men, but the mix suggests that both men and women feel comfortable sharing new product ideas in social media. So ideation is not necessarily unfairly represented by one gender. Now, when it comes to date of birth, far fewer people feel comfortable sharing their age in social media. So in this data set, less than 3% of authors shared their date of birth, so it's essentially impossible to include age as a component in the analytical process. But though it is biased towards people aged 34 and under, there's still a pretty good contribution from people aged 35 and older. So I won't completely throw it out on the basis of age. So to add to our social media problems of spam and memes, we also have to remember that our data is really more reflective of younger people and people who tweet. These are different kinds of data problems than we're used to, but as researchers, we are very used to dealing with problems, whether it's speeding or straight lining or something else. So we can deal with these problems as well. All right, now let's look at the kinds of topics that people mention when they talk about new product development. So after all the data has been collected, you've got hundreds of thousands of nice, clean, spam-free verbatims. Here are a few we found with the phrase, "I wish there was a way." Each one of these is a great idea. A buzzer for a remote control, a mattress with custom high and low points, a one-step button for connecting to Wi-Fi. And here are a few examples of what you get with the phrase, "they should make." So we've got a unique dating website, a wearable music app, reverse microwave, teeth whitening candy. But this is really inefficient. I don't have time. Maybe you do. I don't have time to read hundreds of thousands of verbatims, especially when most of them aren't even about the topic I'm interested. So obviously, if we are going to collect thousands of millions of verbatims, we can't just read through them. We need to apply some text analytics to automatically code them into the appropriate topics. So in our case, every verbatim was run through more than 6,000 pre-validated constructs, which leads us to the next step of analyzing all that information and pulling it together. I suspect you will not be surprised about this since social media is online and requires the use of laptops, tablets, phones. Electronics was by far the most common topic that people mentioned when it came to NPD. Around half of every single verbatim that dreamed and wished and hoped for something new mentioned electronics. But in second place, we've got food, followed by healthcare, followed by social events, and then vehicles. So it's really nice to see that a full range of topics is discussed. So whether your focus is in personal beauty, in politics, clothing, travel, or something else, chances are people are sharing their thoughts on the new products you need to build. So let's start from the top level and work our way down. So I could have shown this same data in chart format with each topic and the number of times it came up. But for our purposes, a word cloud works just as well. So this cloud shows the generic topics that people mentioned. So lots of people are talking about product functionality, pricing, choice, color, and you also see mentions of size, sound, ease, errors, and value. People do mention a wide variety of topics. But as we saw earlier, people can also get very specific. So here you see a word cloud from the electronics variable. There are lots of mentions of phones and gadgets, but people very clearly talked about their cameras, their tablets, smartphones, internet, and more. So any brand manager or researcher focused on one of these topics would have more than enough data points to generate some really great new product ideas. The data does get even finer though. Here we see within the electronics category that phones are the #1 category. So we don't have to just stick with categories. Within the electronics category, we can choose to focus on brands. And here we see that the iPhone brand generates the most wishing and hoping. And far back in line, Netflix, iPad, Apple, Google, MacBook. So people using Apple products really have a lot of hopes for the products. So let's dig a little deeper into the iPhone. And when we look at new product discussions that talk about the iPhone, these are the topics that rise to the top. The battery. And we all know that problem. Why can't batteries last an entire day? And the second big problem is the screen. Who hasn't seen a phone screen that was completely smashed in the last week? So if you wanted to build a new product for the iPhone, this is where you start. But we can get even more specific than that. So let's look at one single basic variable. So when people talk about new product development and the iPhone and colors, these are the colors that get mentioned. So white and black, of course, because that's the basic colors of the phone. But orange is far behind. Bronze is far behind. Purple isn't so common. So if you want to build an iPhone product, I'm thinking that blue, green, pink, and red would be the first colors to review. What we've seen so far, even this page, is a number of obvious things. Yes, we'd expect to look at batteries and colors, but social media is really great for discovering weird things. So here you see 4 word clouds based on 4 separate variables. There's a sport variable, a body part variable, a space variable, and a health variable, all funny in their own right. I can't imagine that you would ever include survey questions about these topics. But in social media, people talk about everything, and they let us listen to it. So in the first case, we see lots of mentions of golf, score, and gloves. So individually, these words are meaningless. Together, however, they are gold. A quick review of those verbatims shows that a lot of people wish they could find a golf glove that would let them use their fingers to keep score on an iPhone. So of course, finger and thumbs is what pops up in the body parts word cloud. So all someone has to do is create a really nice golf glove that allows the user to easily and quickly slip a single finger out of it. Kind of like those really long wedding gloves that lets ladies put a ring on their finger without taking off the glove. And along these lines, what does Mars and death and dying have to do with an iPhone? Well, if they can build a Mars rover that runs on batteries for years without dying, why can't they do the same for a phone? So you can see by evaluating the top variables and the top items within each variable, you can quickly and easily get perspective on what people are talking about in terms of new product development. But this is my absolute favorite new product development need. If someone could just solve the earphone problem, we'd all be good. So if you have a solution, just let me know. I would love to hear from you. So let me just sum up a bit. We've seen that data is different across different websites, which means you really need to make sure you collect more than just Twitter or just Facebook. You also need to think like a consumer. Put aside your professionalism and fancy grammar and think about how people really talk to each other, the words they really use in social media to talk about new product development. And what's really important is to make sure you tune into frustration and wishing and hoping. You might be used to people saying things politely in a survey or a focus group, but when it comes to social media, even the tiny complaints come with a lot of profanity and harsh reality. And finally, pay attention to the stupid things. They might seem funny and trivial, and you get a kick out of it, and you just move on. But if you just stop and think about them for a minute, there's often a really great idea in there. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. If you have any questions at all, feel free to email me, tweet me, Facebook, LinkedIn with me. You can find me pretty much anywhere in social media. I will be happy to answer any of your questions. So thanks a bunch for joining me, and I hope to see you at our webinar next month. Cheers, everyone.